So this video is looking at research methods revision, focusing on the very basics and definitions, not focusing too much in detail on any stats testing or anything like that, mainly looking at sampling methods, hypothesis and variables is what we're looking at for this session. So what do you need with you? Have the revision booklet in front of you that I've given to you in lesson. If you don't have the revision booklet, you can just have a blank piece of paper and write in anything that you need to. Have some pens with you, one colour that you're going to write in continuously and a second colour that you can either mark in or change in. Could use a highlighter if you've not got a different coloured pen. And make sure you've got your phone or a timer nearby. I want you to time yourself doing certain tasks just so you can have a little bit of practice. Now hopefully the instructions should be quite straightforward. We're just going to do a few pages of that booklet today, or a few sheets of paper if that's what you're working on, and then we'll have a second video to add on to this in preparation for your progression assessments or for just some general revision if you needed a recap and a top up. So let's get started. The first task I want you to do is briefly define and evaluate each sampling method. I say briefly, you don't have to write every single thing and your evaluations can be in bullet points. Do it without looking at any of your previous notes, without researching it, do it from your memory to see what you can remember. Pause the video here and time yourself 5 minutes to see what you can do. If you have got the booklet in front of you, the pictures should give you a hint, but pause the video now, time yourself for 5 minutes, see what you can remember. So let's have a look then. Change your colour pen, so anything that you are missing, you can add in a different colour, you know what you need to look over a little bit more. So first of all, systematic sampling. In that first box, that image, systematic, which means every nth person. Now, it could be that you get everyone's name into a list and you select every fourth person, and that is it. You ask them if they would like to participate. If they agree, then you can use them in your study. Now, what's the strength of this? There's low researcher bias. The researcher can't influence whether you have all males in the sample. It's just whoever is fifth, sixth, third, whatever number is suggested. But a weakness is it's not representative. Even though you're doing it at a pretty structured and systematic way, you could still end up with all 16-year-olds, all females, all males, and that's not representative of the target population. The second image that we've got is random sampling. So random, everyone has got an equal chance of being selected. Now you may ask the participants to previously agree to take part or consent to take part and then put everyone's name into a hat and pull them out. Alternatively, you could have everyone's name that could possibly take part that meet the criteria, pick out however many people you need and then ask them if they would like to take part. If they don't consent, you'll have to pick some more out of the hat. When you're describing how to do this in an exam situation, you have to say that you've written everyone's name down on a piece of paper, you've put them all into a hat, you pull them out one by one. What are the strengths of this? Again, there is no researcher bias. Because it's pretty random, you can't sort of be consciously or unconsciously biased towards any individual. But it's definitely not representative. You could still end up with all the same age group, all same gender. And it takes quite a lot of time and effort to complete. Putting the list together, pulling the names out, asking them do they consent, that takes a lot of time to complete as well. Next one is volunteers. So volunteer sampling is when you have something like a poster on a wall or an advertisement in a newspaper on social media asking people with certain qualities to take part. So you might be doing a study on 16 to 18-year-olds, you might be doing it on just males or just females, you might have to have a certain subject at college that you've studied, but you'd put all of these qualities onto this advertisement. So you might say on this advert, 16 to 18-year-olds, males and females can participate in this study on chocolate preferences. If you'd like to take part, come to whichever room that you are doing it in at 2 p.m. on this date. You would give them the information and then it's up to them if they arrive. Now again, there's low researcher bias and it doesn't really take that much effort. You just make a poster and you put it up and then you go sit in the room. So not much effort either, but it's definitely not representative. You could end up with a very, very small sample size. You might want 20 people and only 5 turn up. So it's entirely dependent upon people actually arriving and coming to see your study. Next one is opportunity, so that's those that are free and readily available. Usually you'd stand somewhere quite busy in the middle of a shopping centre, in a canteen, and ask those who walk past you, the first ones who do, would you like to take part? Now, it is quite cost effective, it doesn't take too much effort for you to just stand there and ask people, can you take part please? But weakness, not representative of your target population, and it can have some researcher bias. Consciously or not, there'll be people that you try and avoid based upon their clothes, based upon the way that they're walking, based upon whether they're in a big group or they're in a small group. And you might not do it consciously and think, right, I'm not asking this type of person, but you may do it. So there could be some researcher bias. So the first 4 that we have there, the common denominator that they have is that they are not representative at all, and that's a bit of a problem. We want it to be representative. There is one sampling method that is representative, and that's the last one, and that is called stratified sampling. Now, stratified is a percentage proportion of the target population in the sample that is needed. So you might have a group of people, you know, in the Wirral, out of 1,000 people, there are this many people with brown hair, this many people with blonde hair, and so on, as a percentage. You want a sample, but you're not going to use all 1,000 people. You're only going to use 30. So you need to work out how many people you need in your 30 that make the percentage the same. So there's a proportion. So what you have to do is get the proportion, so the percentage that you start off with, you divide that by 100 to sort of undo the percentage. Then you multiply that number by the amount you need in your sample. So for example, if you've got 60% of the target population, you would do 60% divided by 100, and you want to have 30 participants, you multiply that by 30. Now it's important that you can calculate it, and it's important that you can say how you would do it. The good strength is that it is representative of the target population. It is everything that we need. However, it is very difficult to calculate. You've got to calculate using the formula, and you can't have a decimal of a person. It might come up you need 3.3 people. Decimals can't happen, so it's never going to be exactly that percentage that you have looked at. So whilst it is definitely more representative, it's not going to be perfect every single time. Now the next thing we need to look at, we've finished sampling, gone over a very quick overview, but we need to look at hypothesis writing. Now you might in your head think, now I'm good at hypothesis writing, I can do it all, but in reality we tend to miss marks through very simple things. So first thing I want you to do is write down your key terms for each type of hypothesis, and write down just the key terms, not an example for now, and think, when would you use each of these, what is the purpose of them? So if we have a look through, you need to think about your IV and your DV, and we're going to have a go at writing a hypothesis in a second. But for directional, you need to say things like more than, less than, quicker, slower. They're the types of key terms that you need. For non-directional is there will be a difference, so you don't say which direction it's going to go in. And for a null, you say there will be no difference. When would each of these be used? Directional is when there has been previous research. If a study says, or a scenario says, there has been previous research, it is going to be directional that you have to write. If it doesn't say anything about previous research, or it says there has been no previous research done, then it is non-directional. In psychology, we always write a null for any study that is done. However, in an exam situation, they might just ask you to write one. They won't tend to ask, when will it be written? So we're going to have a go at writing some hypotheses. We're going to do it with an IV, which is with or without music. So that's our independent variable. And your dependent variable is time taken to run 400 metres. Remember, you need to operationalise as much as you possibly can. So that means you have to give your level of measurement. Now, 3 different types of hypothesis, same independent variable, same dependent variable for each. But can you pause the video now and write in the 3 different types of hypotheses there? So let's have a look at an example with your directional hypothesis. With any hypothesis that you write, I want you to make sure you've operationalised your independent variable and your dependent variable. So you need to say how exactly are they being measured. The easiest way to do it, especially for directional, is starting off with your dependent variable. So the dependent variable here is time taken in seconds to run 400 metres. We've said it again after you've said which direction, so again the time taken in seconds to run 400 metres is there. If I do the independent variable in a different colour, it says whilst listening to music is our independent variable said once here, and without music said here. And because it's directional, you need to say whether it's going to be more than or less than. So this says will be less than here. So that is the most important thing to do, making sure you've got your independent variable fully operationalised twice, your dependent fully operationalised twice, and saying which direction it will be in. Now the principles are exactly the same for a non-directional, but instead of saying will be less than, it is saying will be different to, or will be different than, depending on what it is. Your null doesn't quite work the same, but you need to say will be no different. You could just do it exactly the same and put will be no different rather than will be less than. But can you just double check now whether you've fully operationalised your variables or not? So give it a pause, have a look through and correct if you need to. The last thing I want to look at today then, before we do some exam questions, is the type of variables. So we've done independent, we've done dependent variables, fully operationalised, but is there anything that might impact upon a study? And they are extraneous or confounding variables. Now the definitions are already written down here for you, but extraneous variables are anything that might have had an effect. You say might because you don't know for definite. It could be things like sleep. Some people might perform better, might perform worse, we don't know. Anything that's confounding is anything that has had an effect. So usually that's things like gender, because there's different hormones and that will have an effect on certain things. So we need to make sure that we know how we can reduce them, make sure we can identify them and give examples of them as well. So we want to reduce extraneous variables as much as we can by keeping it in a very controlled environment. If you control the environment, you can control the situational variables, things like temperature and light. We can try and control for the participant variables like age and gender by making sure there is an equal split across different groups as well. So those are your different types of variables. So that's just a brief overview of everything that I needed to do for this part. So sampling methods, types of hypotheses and different types of variables. I want us to have a practice now without looking at our notes on some exam questions, and this is written down on that booklet for you with the questions. Now this adds up to 17 marks, which gives you between 25 to 27 minutes-ish to write, maybe slightly over if you have made up time elsewhere, but I want you to time yourself. Pause the video here, time yourself without your notes, and make sure that you have answered every single question, see what you think, and then I'll go through the mark scheme for each one. So pause it, time yourself 26 minutes, add on your extra time if that's what you get, try and handwrite them so you can practice your timing, and then we'll have a look through. So these are the questions that you're asked to answer, and I'm going to go through each one with the mark scheme and describe to you what you should have put. Now I want you to try and give yourself a mark, but the more important thing to do is write your corrections on. And I want you to do this in a different colour pen so that you can see what you need to work on. Is it the way you're writing things, or is it knowledge generally? So different colour pen, I'm going to go through each question, give you the mark scheme and speak through it, correct your answer as you go, pause it where you need to so that you have time to write your notes. So question A then, that was identify the dependent variable in this study. Now you have to say it operationalised, so number of verbal errors will get you 2 marks. That's operationalised because you've said number. But if you've just said verbal errors or fluency, that doesn't get you both marks, it only gets you 1. So make sure you are fully operationalised by saying number of verbal errors. So it's a number bit that makes it operationalised. For B, it says write a suitable hypothesis. Now, it can be directional or non-directional. For this one, it doesn't say anything about research in the scenario, so either is absolutely fine. But again, you get 3 marks for a fully operationalised hypothesis. You only get 2 if you have lacked clarity over one, or you've only operationalised one of them. But you get 1 even if you've written a good hypothesis. If you've not operationalised, so not give the measurements, you only get 1. So a good example for non-directional is there will be a difference in number of verbal errors made by participants who think there are 5 listeners and the number of verbal errors by participants who think there are 100 listeners. So that's been operationalised for both, so number of verbal errors is said and then the amount of listeners. That's the important bit, putting the amounts of listeners in there, putting the actual measure in there. So that's A and B. Try and give yourself some marks, but make sure you've given your corrections in your second colour. Let's look at C then. Now this is 3 marks and it's identify one extraneous variable that the psychologist should have controlled in the study and explain why. So you get 1 mark for identifying the correct or any extraneous variable, and your 2 marks comes from describing why. So appropriate variables, you could have said making sure that it's the same article that they read it in, so it's not something that's more difficult for individuals. The same instructions for each participant, the same temperature, the same light conditions, anything like that. You cannot have gender. This is sort of controlled for. They have got a stratified sample. And you can't say time taken to complete the task because that's how long it is. It just takes out as long as it takes. Can't be controlled for. Some people read quicker than others. So any of those, like the same article being read, the same conditions, same instructions, gets you the 1. But you need to explain how that would impact the dependent variable. So if you've gone for same article, for example, say that this should be controlled as if the article difficulty is different for each individual, then they may make more verbal errors, not due to the amount of listeners they believe they have, but due to the difficulty of the passage. So making sure you've described how it might influence the study if you haven't controlled for it. So that's C. Next one then, D, is out of 2. So explain one advantage of using a stratified sample of participants in this study. So 2 marks, you need to have quite a clear advantage. You can't just say it is representative, full stop. That's only going to get you the 1. You need to say why. So it's representative because different types of people, in this case it's males and females, are represented in the correct proportions of the target population. So linking to target population is key to get you the 2nd mark. E then. So E is explain how the psychologist would have obtained the male participants for her stratified sample. Show your calculations. So essentially this scenario has told you that there are 60 males altogether in the target population. So out of 100, that's 60%. So doing it manually, you could have put all 60 male names in a hat, worked out how many males are needed to mirror the population, so showing that you can do 60 divided by 100 multiplied by 20, which gets you the 12. So showing how you calculated that you would need 12 males gets you a mark. And then saying you pick out 12 names from the hat gets you the 3rd. So it's like 1 mark for each bit. 1 mark for saying every male's name goes into a hat, 1 mark for saying we need 12 and showing how you did 12, and then the 3rd mark for saying pull 12 names out of the hat. Show your calculations is the best thing to do. And then the last question then, F. F says the psychologist wanted to randomly allocate the 20 people in her stratified sample to the 2 conditions. She needed an equal number of males in each condition and an equal number of females in each condition. Explain how she would have done this for 4 marks. You could have said that you put all the males into a hat, all the females. But what you need to make sure that you do is say that it'll be 12 males and 8 females that are used. So she needs 6 males and 4 females in one group, 6 males, 4 females in another. So could have said that give each man a number 1 to 12. So next to their name, 1 to 12. Put all 12 numbers in a hat. The first 6 drawn go into condition A, the remainder are condition B. And then you'd have to say and explain the same process for women. Give all 8 women a number, put the names into the hat, the first 4 go into condition A, the second 4 go into condition B. So it's sort of like 2 marks for talking about the males, 2 marks for talking about the females. You could just say put everyone's name into the hat and the first 6 males picked out go into A, the last 6 go into B. Make sure that you say the first 6 that come out go into condition A. You could explain what condition A is. You could say you could put them into a random name generator, but it's easier to get the marks this way. So just make sure you've been as specific as you possibly can. Now look at your answers. We've marked all the answers and gone through the mark scheme. Is there anything that you need to revise again? Did you do better on the hypothesis question and not so good on this random allocation questions? Have a look and see what you need to look through your notes again. It's all done for this lesson. The sampling, hypothesis and variables sorted. Underneath, if you're using the booklet, it says, what am I still unsure of? Think about just your hypothesis, variables and sampling. Is there anything else that you need redescribing? How are you going to improve this? Make yourself a plan. What are you going to do? What do you need to ask? Do you need to come and ask me questions? Do you need to look in a textbook? What is it that you need to do? So come up with a plan of action so that you can help your revision. And we'll do the second lesson whenever you do so wish. You've got the links that you'll need for the second lesson. If you want to do it straight after this one, go for it, but take a break for a little bit, have something to eat, get away from your notes for a little bit, and then come back and do the second lesson. But thank you for doing some revision. You're going to strive to being successful in your A-levels.